Hello, in this video, we'll be going through convertible bonds. We have so far learned in previous videos all about bonds and that companies issue bonds as a way to raise money instead of going to a commercial bank and borrowing money from a bank. There are certain features that can be added onto a bond that can make them more appealing to investors. And so one of those features is a conversion feature, and these are called convertible bonds. And what these bonds do is the company will sell a bond out in the open market, investors buy them, but the bonds have an option to be exchanged for shares of stock at the option of the bondholder. So it's the investor gets to decide if at some point in the future they would like to convert those bonds into shares of stock for the company that issued those bonds. Now, why would companies sell these convertible bonds? Several reasons. Number one is that the bonds can sell at a higher price. So selling bonds at a higher price, the convertible bonds give investors the option to convert the bond into shares of the issuing company. And this added feature makes the bond more attractive, so investors are actually willing to accept a lower interest rate compared to straight debt. For the issuer, that also means cheaper borrowing costs. Another reason companies will issue convertible bonds is because it can be used as a method of exchange, as a means to exchange in mergers and acquisitions. Convertible bonds can be offered to the target company's shareholders as part of the payment of an acquisition. And that's appealing because it provides the shareholders of the target acquisition a fixed income through via getting the interest payments from the bond. So they get a fixed income initially, and then they have potential upside later if they decide to convert those bonds into shares of the company. And the third reason why companies like to issue convertible bonds is because sometimes companies that have a lot of debt and might struggle to get loans from the bank at a reasonable rate. This is one way that they can issue bonds and make it more attractive to the investors and be able to raise money. So in instances where allowing them to raise funds they otherwise would not be able to. Let's take an example of how the accounting for convertible bonds work. On January 1, 2027, HTL manufacturers issued $100 million of 8% convertible debentures, which are the bonds, due in 2047 at 103. And 103 means it's 103% of the face value. So the face value is 100 million times 103% equals 103 million. The bonds are convertible at the option of the holder into no par common stock at a conversion ratio of 40 shares per $1,000 bonds. HTL recently issued non-convertible 20-year 8% bonds, essentially, at 98. This last bullet point is just in there because it tells us that the company recently issued non-convertible bonds at 98, right? And now they're issuing convertible bonds at 103. So it makes it seem like the convertible feature is worth 5 million, but that's just not how the accounting works. It's going to be, FASB has decided that's going to be too complicated. So for accounting purposes, we're going to ignore this. So if you get this in a problem on the CPA exam, ignore it, okay? Here's how the accounting for it work. We received cash for $103 million, we being the company HTL manufacturers that issued these bonds. The face of the bonds, right, you call convertible bonds payable. It's a liability, and you credit 100 million, you credit for the face amount, and then the premium is credited separately premium on bonds payable for $3 million. So the convertible feature is typically issued at a premium because it is an attractive feature to the investor, and so they will pay more for it. Now let's see what happens when when the bondholder decides to convert that bond into stock. We have the same facts, except now this fourth bullet or third bullet point, half of the bonds are converted at a time when the remaining unamortized premium is $2 million. When we first recorded this bond in the previous slide, we credited the bonds payable for 100 million and the premium was 3. So we credited here bonds payable 100 and the premium was 3. That was on 1/1/27. Since then, we know that when we amortize the premium down, this bonds payable account does not get touched. We never change this bonds payable account. So that account will not be adjusted throughout the bond life. In the meantime, at some point, we don't know, it doesn't matter, the premium was amortized down to 2. That's what we're told. So our premium balance is now 2. And it says half of the bonds are converted when the premium is 2, which means that half of this is being converted, which means that half of this times 1/2 is also being converted. So now we're going to go to the next slide and you'll see what happens with the journal entries. So with the journal entries at the conversion, now we're going to actually debit our convertible bonds for 50 million, and we're going to debit our premium on bonds payable for 1, and we're going to convert that all into stock. So we're going to credit common stock for whatever those numbers are, which is 51. Let's look at the same thing happening, but from the investor side. And let's just say that all 50,000 bonds were held by a single investor. And the way we get 50,000 is because it says when we issue the bonds of 100 million, they can be converted to 40 shares per $1,000 bonds. So if you take the 100 million divided by $1,000, it means that there are 100,000 convertible bonds there are 100,000 bonds that can be convertible. And if we take half of that, that's how we get the 50,000 convertible bonds. So that doesn't go into play with this particular journal entry, but it's good to understand how that 50,000 is calculated because there could be other questions based on that. So the investor is going to, now the investor, right, that's the bondholder, has converted those bonds into stock. So now they have investment in common stock, they have a debit, and they're going to remove the investment that they originally recorded when they purchased this convertible bond, and they're going to credit investment in convertible bonds for the half of the face amount of 50, and they're going to credit their premium on investment bonds for 1.